Everyone, Bram here. You're watching Buy and Hold Fundamentals. It's Saturday, end of the second week. It's time for Saturday summaries, and we're going to look at what we got up to this week. Two summaries this week. One, we finished looking at Fair Lawn, New Jersey. So first we're going to have a look at what we found there, and we had a couple of days looking at Carmel, Indiana, and we'll see what our initial set of data tells us. So here what I've done is I've filtered all of the properties that actually have a cash flow that's higher than $100 a door. And when you do that, looking at the left here on the first pass is that the average price is about $500,000 or 5,500. The rent ratio, the rent is our assumed 1%, so that's coming out as 1% at 5,500. Our cash flow is coming out at about 225 a door, and we have a positive cash on cash return of 2%. But that's based on assumptions. Now, if we take the same properties, leave the prices, the asking prices as is, but we start applying market rent rates, which we can get by looking at the rates that we can find in Zillow. We can look at sites like Rent-A-Meter and other places, which will give us rent rates. We actually go into sites and look for places to rent and find market rates. Applying those market rates, we get a completely different picture. The average purchase price stays the same at $550,000, but the average rent is now down to $2,700, and our average cash flow is down from a positive 225 to a negative 1,400. A negative cash flow, or rather a negative cash on cash of a negative 10%. So this is not a market which, if we go about purchasing properties at asking prices, at market prices, there's a way that we could actually make money off of renting this. The rent ratio in this market hovers around about 0.5%. Does that mean that it's impossible to make money? Not necessarily. It just means that we now need to figure out at what kind of discount we would have to buy a property in this market, and we can have a look at that. So let's assume that we want to buy a property that's going to have the average rent, which was $2,700, and it's more or less at average price, which is $550,000. It would have to be worth $550,000. Taxes on that would be about $12,000 a year. And now the question is, how do you get to having a positive cash flow of $100 a month? And the only real way of doing that is by finding a property that fits these criteria that you can purchase for $120,000. Seems pretty far-fetched, right? And that's probably what it is. But knowing that, should you run into something on in Fair Lawn, you know that you would need that deep of a discount in order to get it. It's something that you probably need to do in every market you look into. Not in all of them they're going to be achievable. But again, someone comes up to you and says, I had this house. You figure out it's worth $500,000, and they're willing to part with it for $120,000. You know that you can make work. And there, obviously, you'd be implementing not just the fact that you're getting cash flow, you're also implementing the principle of buying under market value, so that with your purchase, you're already getting equity. You're gaining equity when you go in, and it doesn't necessarily have to be as radical as buying something at a quarter of its market value. But even if you buy a property at 10% under market value, you've already gone. You've made that money. So let's say you buy a $500,000 house at $450,000. As you buy the property, you've made another $50,000. Okay, so that takes care of. No, we don't want that one. We want this one. That takes care of Fairlawn, New Jersey. Now, we've been looking at Carmel, Indiana for 3 days, looked at 60 properties, and off the cuff, it looks fantastic, right? Again, we're getting kind of similar-ish stats from... stop moving that around. From the assumptions we're making. Again, we're assuming a 1% rent ratio. With that, the average house is worth about $500,000. Rent is about $5,000. Cash flow is almost $600, and we're getting a cash-on-cash return of 5%. That looks fantastic, right? Again, I've now filtered these rather than at whether or not the cash flow is positive, because when looking at Carmel, everything is positive, and I'm saying, okay, what's out there that's under, is $300,000 or under? Because if I'm buying an investment property, I'm not sure that I want to sink so much into the down payment. So, looking at the properties that are under $300,000, and they're not that many. Again, I'm applying market rent rates. These two marked in red were ones where I couldn't find them, so I used sort of the median rent rate, which was 0.65%, and reverse engineered the rents to get an indication of market rates. When you do that, we get a different story. Again, obviously the average is now below 300, because that's what we 300,000 for asking price, because that's what we filtered for. We're seeing that the average rent is around $1,700, and the cash flow is a negative 190. We're also seeing that cash on cash is a negative 3%, and our rent ratio is coming out to 0.75% on average. You'll find, though, that that's sort of skewed by this property. So what I suggest doing is assuming the median rent ratio, which is 0.65%. So going forward, we can take that and start applying that to our initial pass and get a more realistic initial estimate as to the rent and the kind of cash flow that we are or not getting. All right, so that's it for our Saturday summary of the second week. My name's Bram. You've been watching Buy and Hold Fundamentals, and I'll see you tomorrow.